September was the absolute worst reading month I have had in a very, very long time. Hello fellow readers and readresses, I am back in my car because I am visiting my family once more, and although it's relatively a big house, there are surprisingly few places where I can actually film undisturbed and 0 places where there's not a ton of noise all the time. So I decided it will be best to just jump into my car and go into nature and film this video because it's been a few weeks that I haven't filmed anything and I have totally forgotten how to do this. It is the 2nd of October and the weather is just perfect for this time of year with a little bit of clouds, actually quite a bit of clouds, and not terrible heat like we had yesterday and the day before that. So I am really happy about it. To contrast that, I am not very happy with my reading that I've done in September. There have been so many changes that have been happening in my life, some of which are very minute and some of which are gigantic. I'm talking about changes that redefine my life in a way that I haven't experienced since at least 10 years. And that is a little scary and also very exciting, but I'm not ready to talk about it just yet, so I'm probably gonna do that in a video whenever I feel like it, I guess. With that being said, I've been under a lot of pressure in September, and on top of that, the books that I had chosen with my last TBR weren't the best for the mood that I was in, and weren't the best in general. I'm just gonna say it. I was quite disappointed by pretty much all the books that I picked up in September, and I didn't even read all of the books on my TBR. Let's get into it. Oh, and by the way, since I'm clearly traveling, I don't have all the books with me, so I'm only going to show you like 2, and the rest of them I'm just going to show you a picture of their cover somewhere on the screen. So my TBR for September included 8 books in total, and those were Fahrenheit 451 for a leftover book from August. Then we had A Lion's Tale by Chris Jericho, which was also a leftover from August. We had Red Seas Under Red Skies by Scott Lynch for a bookshelf jar pick. The Gunslinger by Stephen King from the prompt cards, and the prompt was to read an adult book. The Martian Chronicles by Bradbury for a bookshelf jar pick. Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo for a 2023 TBR jar pick. Witch King by Martha Wells from the prompt cards, where the prompt was to read the newest book that I own. And The Rhythm of War by Sanderson, which was for my buzzword reading challenge, where the prompt for September was to read books with game-related words. I also participate in Adventure in Eldia reading challenge every month, for which I actually picked Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo, which was for a dark academia book. So, as I said, this amounts to 8 books in total, and out of those, I've read only 4. Not great. I also DNF'd 1, although only temporarily, I think. And then yesterday, I picked up another book and I finished it yesterday on the 1st of October, so I decided to add it to my September wrap-up because, well, I've just read it and I wanted to talk about it really. I need some of your opinions on it because I'm a little confused, but we'll get there. Without further ado, let's get into the books that I read in September in the order in which I picked them up. We're gonna start with a book that I'm so confused by, and that book is Fahrenheit 451 by Bradbury. I had already started it in August and I finished it in September, but it took me surprisingly a long time, and this book prompted me to ask myself repeatedly, can you be disappointed by something you ultimately admire? This book is an adult dystopian classic, and while I ultimately think that the story in and of itself was very meaningful and strangely prophetic in a lot of ways, as well as very vivid, it made me feel this sense of profound loneliness and fear at so many points, but it was ruined by one of its most admirable qualities. And I know that that sounds nonsensical, but I will try to explain. What I'm talking about is the writing style. This whole book is written like a fever dream, and though it follows a linear storyline, often it doesn't feel that way. On top of that, we follow characters that are so erratic in their behavior that I was struggling to figure out their motivation and follow their line of thinking at times. The scenes were unfolding chaotically, and this whole book has a very awkward pacing. And look, I get it. This whole writing style is meant to represent the confused and neutered state in which humans are being forced to live and think in this new society. It was impressive how precisely the author has managed to capture the fuzzy reality in which our main character exists, and he struggled to think through it. I get the intricacies and the complexity of this writing style, and I am duly impressed. But still, I can't say that I liked it. Reading an entire novel written in this abstract style was frankly uncomfortable and, to me, very unpleasant. Trying to follow a story through the muddled half-thoughts and neurotic existential monologues of semi-lucid people was exhausting. And to me, as such, it killed both stakes and suspense. I personally think had the book been written in a more conventional style, it would have made it more accessible and therefore more meaningful, at least to me. I gave it 3 stars and I left it a little bit disconnected. And I would say this book set the tone for the majority of my reading in the month of September, unfortunately. The next book that I picked up was The Gunslinger by Stephen King. This is an adult horror fantasy and the first book in the Dark Tower series. I am probably gonna get a lot of hate for this one because I know that this series and this author has a big fan base, but I can't be dishonest about my opinion, so be prepared about what's gonna follow because I gave this book 2 stars. The copy of this book that I own is 251 pages with relatively large print, and it took me over 3 weeks to finish it. And that is because this is one of the weirdest books I have ever picked up and one of the least enjoyable to read, to be honest with you. Much like Fahrenheit 451, it's also written like a fever dream, except it is void of the meaning that Fahrenheit 451 brings. And at the end of it, I was left to wonder, what was the point of this entire word salad? We have a fusion, or should I say confusion, of post-apocalyptic, Western, and Arthurian fantasy, and pretty much no coherent storyline. Scenes follow one another in whatever order, pacing is a myth, and you couldn't find character motivation to save your life, except for maybe the main character, and I'm not 100% sure about him either, because at times he seems to be motivated by vengeance, and at other times he seems to be motivated by search for truth. The book had tons of potential and terrible execution, and reading it left me feel bored and or annoyed and or lost and or completely disinterested and or disgusted, depending on the scene that I was reading at the time. It didn't help that I was disinterested by pretty much all of the characters pretty much all of the time, to the point of hating them for wasting my time. Frankly, I would have given this a lower rating had it not been for the more lucid moments of the story and the setup, which brings a lot of existential questions, and the potential that those elements have for the continuation of the story. Which, yes, I am planning to continue because some of my subscribers told me that the second book and the third book are way better, and I am looking forward to those. But not right now, because frankly, I am kind of fed up with this type of high-level nonsense books that are written more as an exercise in interpretation rather than for the point of telling a story. Or because at the time, the author was kind of high on drugs, and I'll let you figure out which one it was in this particular case. So yeah, 2 stars. I hope for better in book 2. Also unrelated, but I'm looking forward to the day when I'm gonna pick a Stephen King book that doesn't feature child molestation. Editing Sylvia here. I forgot to mention that right after The Gunslinger, I actually picked up the Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury, but because it was also written in this somewhat abstract writing style, I wasn't enjoying it, so I decided to DNF it temporarily. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna pick it up one day, but it's not gonna be anytime soon. So, as I said, I was in reading slump, and I was attempting to fix that by picking up a book that I had very high expectations for, and that took me forever to finish. Literally, I finished it on the 30th of September. And that book is Red Seas Under Red Skies by Scott Lynch. This is an adult epic fantasy and the second book in the Gentleman Bastard series. I loved the first book, The Lies of Locke Lamora. I read it in 2020 or 2021, and I loved it. I thought it was phenomenal. That the plot was very interesting, very intricate. The writing style was lovely. I had the best time reading it. And then I picked this one up, and it picks up right where book 1 left off. And that first part I really enjoyed. The characters were picking up the pieces and were trying to overcome difficulties, both internal and external, and were making grand plans for new things like we like to see them do. And then at about 20-30% of the book, the author decided that okay, this is not enough, so he injected another villain and a little bit more plot, and the story became bigger. I didn't see how those are related, but at the time I was intrigued. I was like, okay, how is he gonna connect all of those? But then at about 40% of the book, it seems that the author decided that okay, that's not the story I want to write, so he ejected the first storyline completely from the story, changed the setting completely, and it felt like we started from the beginning all over again, and I felt so disconnected because this is not what I came here for. I was already captured by the initial plot, and now I had to completely switch gears, which again was very disorienting. And while this second book within this book was interesting in its own right, the way that the author structured it kind of ruined the book. And then a chapter before the ending of the book, we go back to the original plot and resolve it super quickly and kind of half-assedly, in my opinion. The intrigue that he had managed to create with that was just completely lost. Honestly, the entire plot of this book was a total mess. We had so many twists and turns, which created some plot holes as well. At the end, so many questions were either unanswered or answered insufficiently, very unsatisfyingly, and I was left completely disinterested. Now, despite of all I just said, I gave the book 3 stars, mostly because I still love our 2 main characters, and the writing style and skill with word that Scott Lynch utilizes are absolutely phenomenal, especially when it comes to sarcasm and creative ways to insult people. Frankly, I don't like crass language and cursing in books, but I think in the books from this series, it's done very tastefully and skillfully and enriches the story itself. But I would like to mention something that made an impression on me, and not a good impression, and that is the fake morality that the author tried to inject in this book at one point. And I'm calling it fake because it doesn't correspond with the rest of the message of this series. You are writing a book about thieves, sir, willing thieves who are stealing for the sake of stealing. They are literal priests of the god of thieves. One of them took over a gang by beating little kids to assert his dominance. So any financial and or social morality you would like to inject rings hollow in this context. Luck Lamora is no Robin Hood, and I don't care that they're stealing from rich people. They have no high horse to sit on. And I liked Locke in book 1 specifically because he didn't pretend to be anybody else and fully acknowledged who he was. Anyway, overall, the book is okay, but I wouldn't call it a masterpiece, and I was definitely disappointed by it. So, as you can imagine, at this point of the month, I was fully disconnected from reading, in the throes of a reading slump, super disappointed by all of the books that I had picked up until this moment, and I decided to go for one last Hail Mary and picked up Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson, which is a high fantasy and the 4th book in the Stormlight Archive. Now, for any of you who have watched 1 or 2 videos on this channel, you know that Brandon Sanderson is one of my favorite authors out there, definitely my favorite currently writing fantasy author. And the Stormlight Archive is one of the series that define me as a person. I was so worried that I'm gonna dislike this book, which is one of the reasons why I had procrastinated picking it up for like 2 years now. And I'm kind of happy I did that because I have changed quite a lot for the past 2 years, and you might think that's not a very significant period of time, but a lot of things have happened to me during this period of time, both good and bad, and those have redefined who I am in quite a bit of ways. As such, I absolutely loved this book, and I probably would have loved it still 2 years ago, but not as much as I did right now, because this book shifts the focus from our main characters, or at least some of our main characters, towards some of the more secondary characters and brings them up to the forefront. And while we still get to follow our 3 main ones, we get to experience and know some of the other ones more significantly. I related so much to what the author brought, and the whole time I was reading this book, especially towards the end, I had this thought in my head, and that was, there goes Brandon Sanderson again, saving me tons of money in therapy. Obviously, I don't want to describe anything about the plot of this book because it is book number 4 and I don't want to spoil anybody. What I'm going to say is that I love where this book went, including the difficult paths that it chose for some of our characters. I loved how it broke my heart. I loved how the author broke down our characters and then built them up again. I loved how much the world got expanded and how much more I learned about the Cosmere, and especially about the Rosharan system. I love how at the end he united them, and I'm not gonna elaborate on that. If you know, you know. And I love the shock that he delivered to me in the epilogue. I'm still thinking about it. So I gave this book 5 stars. It's the one redeeming quality of the month of September. I loved it and I can't wait to reread it. And those were the only books that I finished in September. I picked up 2 more. Actually, one of them I already picked up in August, and that is A Lion's Tale by Chris Jericho. I'm still reading it. I'm having such a good time reading this book. It's so interesting to me. It revealed a lot of the backstory of Chris Jericho, one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. However, I wasn't able to finish it because of the reading slump I was in and because of the lack of desire I had to pick up anything at all. I also picked up Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo, which is the second book in the Alex Stern duology, the first one being Ninth House, which I read last year and quite enjoyed. I am like 25% into the book and I'm having a good time with it, but I didn't feel like reading it at the time time, and only now I'm starting to really get into it and enjoying it. It's going into interesting places, so I'm looking forward to finishing it in October. Hey, it's me again. I forgot to mention The Witch King by Martha Wells, which was also on my TBR, but I didn't even pick it up this month. I'm gonna try to read it in October, but I can't promise anything. So this is the current situation with my TBR for September. 2 books transferred into October, but as I already mentioned, I already read one book in the month of October, which was yesterday, the 1st of October, and I read it so quickly because it's a very quick read and I was very intrigued by it. The book is Sometimes I Lie by Alice Feeney. This is an adult thriller. I don't want to tell you anything about it because I think it's best if you go into this book fully blind. This book I actually added to my TBR after watching the wrap-up of one of my favorite booktubers, and that is Mac from Cat and Mac. I'm gonna link her channel in the video description. She talked about it, was it last month, I think, or the month before that? I'm not 100% sure, but she got me really intrigued about it. It is a very quick read. We have a woman in a coma and she doesn't remember how she got there, but she can hear everybody in the room when they speak, and she can think, but she can't move or give any sign that she's awake. We get her story revealed to us by her in multiple timelines, and we kind of start to piece together the picture. And there are so many plot twists in this book, I can't even wrap my mind around all of them. I gave the book 4 stars. I was super intrigued by it. I loved my reading experience, but at the end, I am a little confused as to what exactly happened, because the ending is a bit ambiguous, but also a lot of the twists within the book are a little bit ambiguous, and I have a theory as to what happened, but I'm not 100% sure. And so I need somebody to talk to about this. Unfortunately, none of my friends in real life have read this book, and so Mac, if you're watching this video, could you please let me know what you think happened and who was the actual villain at the end, or were there multiple ones? I need a second opinion because if what I think happened actually happened, the book is a 4-star and maybe even a little bit higher. But if it's another thing that I also think might have happened but I'm not as sure about it, then the book is 2 stars and I didn't enjoy it at all. It is really confusing, honestly. What I'm gonna say though is that I really like the author's writing style, and she manages to create these scenes that are so vivid. I don't know if any of you have been cheated on, but I have, not recently, years ago, but the author managed to bring these feelings to the forefront all over again, and the dread of suspecting that your loved one is betraying you in this terrible way. And that made it so difficult to read, but also enjoyable in this masochistic way that I can't explain. Kudos to the author for being able to do that, but also be warned that there are some very heavy topics that are being discussed in this book, so read at your own discretion. So to summarize, in the month of September, I read 4 books, 5 if we count Sometimes I Lie, for a total of 2,696 pages, and DNF'd 1 book. In terms of genre, 3 of the books were fantasy, 1 was thriller, and 1 was science fiction. In terms of formatting, 2 of the books were hardbacks, 2 were paperbacks, and 1 was ebook. And in terms of sourcing, I owned 4 of the books and borrowed 1. This will make the month of September my worst reading month in a very long time, not just in terms of number of books and pages read, but also in terms of ratings, because I think my average rating for the month is about 3.5 stars, if that. And that is very low for me, being that I try to read books that I think I'm gonna enjoy, and I usually guess it right. As such, I am very happy the month of September is over, that the reading slump is over, and looking forward to the month of October, where hopefully I will be able to read way better books and enjoy myself way more. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please let me know what you read in the month of September. Did it go any better? Have you read any of these books? Do you have any opinions on them? And what do you think happened in Sometimes I Lie if you read this book? Thank you so much for watching, and if you'd like to see some of my other wrap-ups, check out this playlist. Bye!